Welcome to Safety, Function, Action for Disaster Responders. This course is composed of 6 modules, a total of 20 lessons, and in this overview, this is going to be a single lesson module. The funding for Safety, Function, Action for Disaster Responders has come from U.S. federal funding sources, specifically from the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, ASPR, which is within the Department of Health and Human Services, and also from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, with dollars going through cooperative agreements to the state of Florida through the Florida Department of Health. The funding for the development came to Deep Center, which is the Center for Disaster and Extreme Event Preparedness, at the Leonard M. Miller School of Medicine at the University of Miami in Miami, Florida. Safety, Function, Action is a framework for achieving and maintaining a high level of disaster health and well-being. So a couple of points here. In emergency management and in disaster response, we deal routinely with frameworks. In fact, in the United States, our entire response is grounded on the National Response Framework. So Safety, Function, Action is also a framework. And we're now going to also focus on a term that you may or may not have heard before called disaster health.
The concept of disaster health was introduced formally within Homeland Security Presidential Directive 21, HSPD 21, released in 2007 during the presidential administration of George W. Bush, under the name of the National Strategy for Public Health and Medical Preparedness. Within the 44 paragraphs, a very short document, there is one paragraph that specifically describes disaster health as a discipline, and a discipline in particular that will bring together medical, public health, public safety, and behavioral aspects of disaster preparedness and response. We have decided to focus our approach to disaster health by giving our own definition. The presidential directive did not give a definition to disaster health. This is the operational definition we will use for Safety, Function, Action. We describe disaster health as maximal safety, optimal function, and effective action in preparedness for and response to emergencies, disasters, and extreme events.
The focus of disaster health framework, as portrayed in Safety, Function, Action, is that we're going to be focusing on disaster responders of many types. When we think about disaster responders, we certainly think about the first responders like fire rescue, emergency medical services, law enforcement, persons who may specialize in hazardous material spills or rapid response organizations or operations. We also may have some specialty and extended responders who work for the Federal Emergency Management Administration, or perhaps are members of the urban search and rescue teams or the disaster medical assistance teams, or also the state equivalent, the state medical assistance teams. And of course we have to think about the first receivers. So when the first responders, including the EMS, scoop and run with the casualties at a disaster scene, who do they bring them to? The folks at the hospital. So quite often the first responders might be pre-hospital personnel, and the first receivers are hospital-based personnel. But we also include under first receivers the public health professionals as well. There are many types of volunteers in disasters. For example, members of community emergency response teams, Medical Reserve Corps, American Red Cross, and members of community and faith-based disaster organizations. In addition, we may also have critical infrastructure. So these are the people who turn the crank, who are operating our power systems, who are operating our transportation services, the persons who are supplying our vendors, the people in public works, the utility responders, the persons who are in positions to maintain our critical infrastructure. So all of these are potential audiences for Safety, Function, Action. Now, our course is based on goals, strategies, objectives, and tactics. And I'm going to start with the overarching single goal of the course, which is very simply to achieve and maintain a high level of disaster health and well-being. Achieve and maintain a high level of disaster health and well-being. And remember, what is disaster health? It is maximal safety, optimal function, and effective action in preparedness for and response to emergencies, disasters, and extreme events. So, using those three keys, it's not a surprise to you that they also happen to be the three words in the title of the course: maximal safety, optimal function, effective action. And to be able to achieve these three keys, we have developed a set of 6 strategies. So the strategies are safeguard, sustain, comfort, connect, advise, and activate. And they match up with the 3 keys very simply. For the key of safety, safeguard and sustain. For the key of function, comfort and connect. For the key of action, advise and activate. And so 6 simple one-word strategies are really the pivot of this particular course. We also have a graphic that we've used at times which portrays in a cube safety, function, action, and the 6 strategies: safeguard, sustain, comfort, connect, advise, and activate in a single diagram. Now, one of the important hallmarks of this course is that when we look at the 3 keys, safety, function, action, and the 6 strategies, they operate in parallel. Because this is a course for responders, we would ask, what are the key strategies we need to apply to responders? And they are, in fact, safeguard and sustain, comfort and connect, advise and activate. But what are the types of duties that responders bring in their work with survivors? They can also be portrayed in terms of the same 6 strategies: safeguard, sustain, comfort, connect, advise, and activate. Historically, there have been courses separate for responders and for survivors, and in developing this course we thought we really can use the same 6 strategies for both responders to use with their own teams and for responders to use when they assist survivors. Now, in addition to that, we add 2 skill sets because responders have special duties in response, and so they need to be able to prepare. They need to be able to plan and practice for their disaster role. They also need to be able to prioritize stress management. And it's also important how you approach survivors. So we've developed a response skill set that talks about how to best approach and to appraise the needs of disaster survivors, and also to be able to address and attend to their special needs, and also to be doing this in a culturally competent manner. So when we put this together, just as a repeat of the previous slides, we have a single goal for the course, which is to achieve and maintain a high level of disaster health and well-being, with a reminder of our definition. Disaster health is maximal safety, optimal function, and effective action in preparedness for and in response to emergencies, disasters, and extreme events. And so from that, highlighted in color, we can see the 3 keys to disaster health, which also is the namesake of our course: safety, function, action. And for every one of those 3 keys, we have exactly 2 strategies: safeguard, sustain, comfort, connect, advise, activate. And we add 2 skill sets to prepare the responders and also to prepare for the response to survivors. When we put this together into a series of modules, you can see them in this particular format. And so what we have here are the overview. That's where we are right now. And then we're going to be talking about disaster health. And then we have 3 lessons when we talk about the prepare skill set: planning and practicing for the disaster role, as well as prioritizing stress management. We then apply the 6 safety, function, action strategies to responders. And by this time you know the litany. It's safeguard, sustain, comfort, connect, advise, and activate. In the 5th module, we use a respond skill set teaching responders how best to approach survivors, how to attend to their special needs in a culturally competent manner, and how to specifically assess and appraise survivors' needs. And then, finally, last module, we're going to be talking about applying those same 6 well-known strategies by now to survivors: safeguard, sustain, comfort, connect, advise, activate.
There are a number of distinctions that make Safety Function Action a unique course. First and foremost, this is the first course focusing specifically on disaster health. And remember, we have defined disaster health as maximal safety, optimal function, and effective action in preparedness for and response to disasters, emergencies, and extreme events. We integrate public health, medical preparedness, and disaster behavioral health together in one course. The primary focus, and it needs to be, is on disaster responders. However, we are able to use one framework and the same 6 strategies: safeguard, sustain, comfort, connect, advise, and activate, for both disaster responders to use within the team and for responders to use when supporting survivors. Safety Function Action operates 360 degrees throughout every phase of the disaster emergency management cycle. It can be used during the phases of prevention and mitigation and preparedness and protection, as well as when responders are in response, recovery, and reconstruction mode. Safety Function Action incorporates resilience training for responders as well as psychological support for survivors. Very important, Safety Function Action is structured for evaluation. So, top of the order, Safety Function Action is the first course in the nation to focus explicitly and exclusively on disaster health for disaster responders.
So in the process, we then integrate medical preparedness, the physical health dimension, public health, and disaster mental and behavioral health into one single framework. And so disaster health is a discipline that integrates strategies for public health and public safety, medical preparedness, and disaster behavioral health with the purpose of achieving and maintaining maximal safety, optimal function, effective action in preparedness for and in response to emergencies, disasters, and extreme events. As mentioned, we have one framework for responders and survivors, and so let me repeat that framework that shows the modules that you've seen before. But now what I've done is to highlight for you in 2 columns on the left. The responder focus is in the prepare skills set because we're preparing the responders, and in applying the 6 strategies to responders to use within the response teams. And the survivor focus is primarily within the respond skill set. We're teaching our responders how best to deal with survivors in the way that they approach them, attend to their needs, and assess what those needs are. And also, it's very understandable, in fact this is what you do all the time, that you will safeguard and sustain and comfort and connect and advise and activate disaster survivors. So this is the dual focus on responders and survivors using the same strategy names and a very parallel approach. We also mentioned that safety function action operates 360 degrees throughout the disaster cycle. So you can apply this within your response teams during the time between disasters or between emergency calls, what we might call the inter-incident or inter-disaster period. This is where you have a chance to primarily focus on prevention and mitigation and preparation, and also protecting your workforce. Now, in addition to that, when disaster strikes and you are in response mode, and after disaster when you are helping with the recovery, again, you can still apply, in fact, especially apply the safety function action strategies. And finally, when we're looking at how we build both resilience training for responders and psychological support for survivors, what you will see is, especially in that disaster mental and behavioral health component, which overlaps and matches up with our focus on physical health and public health, we train resilience for responders, psychological support for survivors, and let me make that explicit, because then when we look at our module structure, you can see with the red circles the items that traditionally have been in courses to build resilience for responders. And we cover that plus more. And with the green circles, you can see the items that are traditionally in courses where we teach responders how to best deal with the needs of survivors. We teach all of those, and we teach more. So that would be the set of distinctions for safety function action.